Today we are going to talk about theories about conflict. First day we defined what conflicts are, the violence, what are the root causes of conflict, types of conflict. Uh, we saw all that. Today we are going to see, today I'll be very fast, less examples. Uh, I want to finish very quickly so that we can have more question and answers. The question and answers ideally should be about the session we have talked today, or if there are some questions about previous 2 days, also we can take that up. So we'll just see the various approaches. Uh, what are the different theories that about conflict, that why conflicts are caused. Remember, uh, our conflict resolution approach will also depend on how we see the conflict, how these theories see why there are conflicts in the society, what are the different explanations for conflicts in the society as to what causes the conflict. The root causes we already saw. Root causes are either determination of territories and boundaries. Second, uh, sharing land, water, and natural resources. That is the second ground of conflict. The third ground is when one group tries to dominate over the others or becomes hegemonic over the others, either in name of race, community, caste, religion, region, or whatever criteria. And the fourth is hierarchical structures like feudal structures, caste structure, patriarchy. These are hierarchical structures. When there is hierarchical structures, there is bound to be conflict because one group permanently tries to dominate over the other. These were the things that we saw last time. Now let's see what are the different explanations of why conflicts are caused. I'll be very quick, very fast, maybe less than half an hour. We'll try and finish this so that we have more time for discussion. And I would welcome you to use these theories uh, for conflicts around you and give examples after I finish very quickly. The first theory, these theories are not mutually exclusive. Any conflict may be explained by one theory or any or more than one of the theories that we are going to examine today. So these are not necessarily exclusive theories, or these are not antagonistic. Uh, they are complementary. So more than one theory can explain. And these theories look at conflicts from different angles. So the first theory is community relations theory. It assumes that conflict is caused by ongoing polarization, mistrust, and hostility between different groups within the community. Uh, Polarization is not inherent and natural. Differences may be inherent and natural, as we saw that there are different cultural styles. One may be born into one culture, one community, one caste, and because of that, you could have one definite value. You imbibe certain perspectives, certain approach towards life, certain values, which may be different from others. But polarization is work in progress. Some people use those differences to construct polarization. Uh, on that basis, on the basis of difference. For example, Hindus and Muslims were different throughout. There were different, there were differences and different approaches, different explanations, different philosophies, uh, so on and so forth. In India, there has been Christianity for almost 2000 years, more than 2000 years. And Islam is here for more than 1400 years. Buddhism is here for 2500 years. Jainism is here for similar period of time. For so long, different religions are cohabiting together, sharing, but there, but the polarization along religious lines is a recent phenomena, not even 200 years old. What happened 200 years ago? Britishers came, they introduced certain changes, and because of those changes, partly intended by Britishers and partly unintended by Britishers, and certain elite of the community belabored and constructed community around religions. Muslim community, Christian community, Hindu community. These are not natural communities, they were constructed communities. There were people following Islam, but there was no community or community feeling of all Muslims as one and all Hindus as one, and having similar political, economic, or and social goals. These communities were constructed, and polarization, binaries, that either you are a Muslim or you are a Hindu. We had, I'm not going to many such examples, but we had a situation where it was and it is still difficult to classify many communities in India either as Muslim community or as Hindu community, either as Christian community exclusively or as Hindu community, so on and so forth. So people go to dargahs also, people go to temples also, people go to church also. Uh, what will you classify them as? These communities were, these fuzzy communities were constructed as exclusive communities based on polarization. So this community relations theory believes or explains conflict in terms of polarization, mistrust, and hostility between different groups within community. These differences, based on these differences, polarization, mistrust, and hostility is constructed. So either you belong to this community or to the other community. The other, we and they. And Jinnah did it, Muslim League did it, Hindus did it, Savarkar constructed a community, Golwalkar constructed a community, and the Hindutva political ideology constructed a Hindu community. Jinnah constructed a Muslim political community, Muslim nation, Hindu nation, and they were binary, they were pitted against one another, they were pitted as enemies of one another. Uh, in order to gain more political rights, you have to fight the other community, and the political rights of the other community have to be diminished or constricted. So this community relations theory creates polarization. Certain elite belabor, create polarization, create mistrust, and create hostility between different groups. So the differences can be exploited and are exploited by the elite of the community. And once that polarization and mistrust and hostility takes place, then you have conflicts around those differences. So how does community relation theory see resolution of conflicts? What should a peacemaker do? Has to improve communication between the communities that is under conflict. For example, if there's a mistrust between Hindus and Muslims, Hindus believe that Muslims are pro-Pakistan, anti-national, terrorist, etc., etc. Maybe improved communication between the two communities will improve relations and lower down conflicts, lessen the conflicts. So this is how community relation theory, so greater communication and promote greater tolerance and acceptance of diversity. This is what we in Center for Study of Society and Secularism are also doing, bringing communities together on during festivals, or many secular institutions can bring communities together. The educational institutions, government to access government schemes, or many government bodies or government institutions can bring communities together, or festivals, various institutions, trade unions, Professional associations bring communities together. In trade union, Hindu workers, Muslim workers, Christian workers, Jain workers, Buddhist workers, all workers come together and negotiate with each other and build bonds. And when they are building bonds, there's a communication established, and when communication is established, the mistrust lessens, and there is more increased knowledge about each other, uh, uh, etc. So this is what communication relations theory believes is the cause of conflict. The second theory that explains or that looks at conflicts assumes that people have incompatible positions, that parties have incompatible positions. And because of those incompatible positions, it gives rise to conflict. Now, therefore, what should be done is we explore the wider causes of conflict and not just associate conflict with personalities. For example, somebody may not like a personality of in the conflict. Some person gets so much identified with the cause or the goal that people start opposing the person itself. All right. So, principled negotiation theory believes that you should bring the parties back to the principles, the causes of conflict, examine the incompatibility of goals, and rise above personality. So, separate personalities. How do they recommend resolution of conflict? That you must separate personalities from the problems and issues, and assist negotiation on basis of interests that are in conflict rather than fixed positions. And remember, coming up with win-win solution, as we saw earlier, integration, one of the ways of solving conflict was integrating, and integration was one way, that I integrate your concerns with mine and we address it together, a win-win situation. So the principled negotiation theory believes that shift the parties from where they have got stuck, either with the personalities or with a fixed goal. All right. So make them flexible, enable parties to become flexible, and to facilitate agreements that offer mutual gain for both parties. So the win-win solution that we saw in our previous session, uh, that is what principled negotiation theory would recommend. Now, human needs theory believes, and some of it was said by previous speakers as well, previous other resource persons as well, that whenever the basic needs of human beings are unmet, unmet need leads to conflict. They give a very stupid sounding example, but it may be relevant, it may help us. If say if a rodent is hungry, and no matter how much you close your house, home, lock your home, that rodent will find a way to enter some home or the other, because that rodent has unmet need. Whatever the threat, whatever you do to obstruct that rodent's entry into your home, because there's a conflict. All right. So there's this human needs theory believes that you must address yourself to fulfilling basic needs of all human beings to lessen conflict. Conflict is caused by unmet or frustrated basic human needs. Those needs might be physical, psychological, social, it may be security related, identity related, recognition related, participation and autonomy. All these are human needs that must be fulfilled, and if they are not fulfilled, there will be conflict. Many conflicts can be explained according on the basis of unmet human needs theory. unmet needs. Now, what is the resolution that human needs theory recommends? To assist conflicting parties to identify and share their unmet needs and generate options for meeting those needs. We help each other meet those very basic human needs, and to reach an agreement that meet the basic human needs of all sides, that education, health, food, shelter, clothing, housing. These are all basic needs that must be taken care of. Otherwise, there will be conflict. Next, there is identity theory, which which believes that conflict is caused by feelings of threatened identity, often rooted in unresolved past loss and suffering. So identities are always constructed on the basis of how you suffered in the past. There are many examples of identity theory conflicts that can be explained on basis of identity theory. Kashmiriyat, for example, the whole conflict in Kashmir partly can be explained also on the basis of identity theory. That when Kashmiriyat or Kashmiri identity is threatened, they demand autonomy. Uh, People go back into history, dig out the past, they produce their own past in such a way that we have suffered. Or Hindu-Muslim conflict is also explained, can also be explained on the basis of identity theory. Both Hindus and Muslims go into the past, their own golden past. And mind you, this the so-called golden past was actually constructed by uh, British historians, James Mill, Eliot and Dawson. They wrote Indian history, and and the periodization of ancient past, Hindu past, which they called Hindu past rather than ancient past, Muslim past, and then ancient Hindu period, Muslim period, and then they called themselves as British period, not Christian period. So they construct, and then these communities, Muslim community or Hindu community, the elite of this community, the gatekeepers of this community, or those who are constructing identities based on Muslim, Hindu and Muslim religion, projected how they suffered in the past and what was their golden past. So they constructed their golden past, and then their sufferings, their losses. So now they want to take revenge for the past. Or the Dalits, for example, they go into the past, construct a Dalit identity, look into the grievances. So identity theory explains that how conflicts are caused by feelings of that threatened identity. Whenever identity is threatened, if you find more liberal governments world over, you'll find less of conflict, more democracy, more multiculturalism, will be less of conflicts. To give an example of a multicultural country, Canada, there's a French-speaking province, Quebec. Once French-speaking province felt their identity was threatened, demanded to go for self-determination, a vote to separate from Canada and declare themselves as a separate country. When all rights were given, when French language was given enough space and the province was given enough autonomy, etc., when their identity was not threatened, when they felt that their cultural identity is not threatened in any way, they were allowed to go for self-determination and vote whether they want to remain with Canada or separate. Quebec voted to be with Canada and not for separation. So less the threat to identities, lesser the threat to identities, lesser the conflict. So, what are the goals? Uh, that a peacemaker who at the identity, looks at the conflicts from identity theory, through workshops and dialogue for conflicting parties, facilitate to identify the threats, fears they each feel, and to build empathy and reconciliation between themselves. Coexistence, a space, a arena, possibility of coexistence with empathy for each other. So once you construct that, once they understand each other's identity needs more, levels of conflicts are reduced. Jointly agree to recognize core identity needs of all parties. So this is the identity theory. The next theory is intercultural miscommunication theory. Conflict due to incompatibility of different cultural communication styles. Uh, when on the first day I mentioned uh, that when I went to an Adivasi area, I saw women clothing themselves completely differently, which was uh, which was in a way very strange. And for me, not so much for me, but for an urban person, it might be a cultural shock how they dress. So when you have different communication styles, when your way of communication, your values, or your appearances are different, sometimes those can cause conflict. Uh, Very quick example, just one liner: ban on face veil in public in France. Public face veil is seen as a as something against women's rights, and feminists oppose that in Western society. And therefore, the French government came with a policy, with a rule, with a law that does not allow women to wear face veil. They can wear their chadar, or they can cover their body. Their face has to be opened, and so uh, these are the conflicts. There can be many in India. You know, ABP fellows opposing women wearing jeans because it's considered as Western culture. They oppose wearing face veil and burqa. They've entered into campus and tried to remove or pull out those burqas of wearing by Muslim women, or expel them from the campuses. Many educational institutions have made rules that women with face veil cannot enter. Girl students with face veil cannot enter the campus, etc. There are many examples that we can give. Uh, Now, cultural style of one community is considered as incompatible by another community. How you uh, clothe yourself, how the food you eat. For example, the food in India, dietary restrictions because of religion are causing huge conflicts in India. Beef ban, cow slaughter ban, etc., etc., vegetarianism, so on and so forth. So conflict due to incompatibility of different cultural communication styles causes conflict. Now, how do they address uh, or what do they do to resolve the conflicts? To increase conflicting parties' knowledge of each other's culture. If they know why they follow a certain culture, maybe they'll have more empathy, more understanding. To weaken negative stereotypes they have of each other, and to enhance effective intercultural communication. So peace workers have to undertake these. Now, conflict transformation theory. We saw conflict transformation as one of the resolution methods of resolving conflict. Now, conflict transformation theory believes that conflict is caused by real problems of inequality and injustice expressed by competing social, cultural, and economic frameworks. So if you have inherent inequality and injustice, it will lead to conflicts. All right. So what do? You change the structures so that they do not produce inequality or they do not cause injustice to anyone. Presently, we have structures that produce inequality or that enhance inequality. In India, for example, according to Oxfam study, the richest 1% of Indians own, I'm forgetting the exact figure, but own more than about 74% of India's wealth. Richest 1% owning that much of, so obviously the system, the policies, the structures that we are following is causing this inequality. So how will the conflict transformation theory address?
Sir, if you can speak a bit louder.
Okay, I'm speaking quite loudly, but I'll keep the mic nearer. Something has happened to the mic. Am I loud now? Am I okay now?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, so I'm keeping mic near my. So conflict transformation theory believes to change the structures, frameworks or policies that cause injustice or inequality. Did we say that conflict transformation is using the negative energies of conflict to bring about a positive change in the society, in the framework? So bring the those who are suffering inequalities and injustice, if they are divided along cultural lines or they are conflicting against each other, bring them together in order to create a positive change, in order to change the structure. Uh, the immediate example that comes to my mind for this is the Russian Revolution in 1917. We all know socialist revolution took place in Russia in 1917. Russia was in the First World War, fighting the Allied forces, aligning with the Axis forces. Soldiers were hungry, peasants were hungry, there was a drought situation in Russia, and Russia was fighting war on the side of Axis forces in the First World War. Lenin and the Socialist Party there brought workers and soldiers and peasants together to transform the society and bring about a socialist revolution in 1917. And then after bringing that revolution, they withdrew from the First World War and started addressing the basic needs of and the structures that created injustice. So to change structures and frameworks that cause inequality and injustice, including economic redistribution, bring about economic redistribution to lessen conflict. So that is the goal of conflict transformation. Using negative energies of conflict to bring about positive change in structures that will address those inequalities and injustices in the wider social context, to improve long-term relationships and attitudes, to develop processes and systems that promote empowerment, justice, peace, forgiveness, reconciliation, and recognition. I'm done with. Thank you. So as I promised, I tried to finish within half an hour so that we could have time left for half an hour for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, sir. If there's any question, you could either raise your hand or you could simply type the question in the chat box. Either way. Okay, there's Manoj Rajguru. Yeah, Manoj, go ahead. I
You
have.
can ask questions or you can share examples from these theories. If you think these theories are relevant to any of the conflict that you see around you, but please be brief. Yes.
Thank you, Irfan sir. I just want to say that you mentioned identity in human needs theory. Okay, then how can we differentiate between human need theory on the aspect of identity and identity theory? The first thing. Or the second question is, can we call it interest-based theory also?
Now, see, I'm sharing the screen once again to go back to those. Uh, See, identity theory. Just a minute. Have I shared the screen?
Yes.
Is shared screen available? Yeah.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
available.
So, identity theory believes conflict is caused by feelings of threatened identity, often rooted in unresolved past, loss, or suffering. The examples that I gave was British periodization of history into Muslim past, Hindu past, and then the British past. All right, and each community, the elite of the gatekeepers of identities of these communities constructed an identity around that past, and then the identities are in conflict. Okay, uh, human needs theory is talks only about human needs, and yeah, conflict is caused by unmet or frustrated basic human needs, physical, psychological, and social. Security and identity are also considered as human need, basic identity, because uh, I'm I'm Irfan engineer. I have layers of identities on me, and those layers are: I'm a male, my mother tongue is Gujarati, my state language is Marathi, I'm an Indian, I used to practice law, so identify with lawyers and advocate, professional identity, my likes, my dislikes, my religion, so on and so forth. I have layers and layers of identity. Any of these identity, if it is all these identities are also my needs. And when these identities are threatened, there will be conflict. And to begin with,
These aspects we are talking about individual identity.
Many identities, not just, whereas the identity theory believes that at the larger, see, individual has multiple identities. When this identity is threatened, there will be conflict. If somebody insults me as a Muslim, as a Gujarati, as a Maharashtrian, as a lawyer, as an Indian, there will be a conflict. All right. Whereas the identity theory talks about larger communities constructed around identity, which feel the threatened past. And I told at the beginning that a conflict may be seen from not one, just one of these exclusive aspects. It can be seen from multiple dimensions, and all or some or many of these theories might explain a conflict. So it's not mutually exclusive, that if this theory explains, it excludes all other theories from explaining that. They all look from different perspectives, different angles. Yeah,
Yeah, there is the second question is from Mushtaq Sikandar. Yeah, Mushtaq, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Irfan sir, for a very nice and brief presentation. Just to give few examples, like you stated about a number of theories, if we take a case study of Kashmir, so most of these theories are quite relevant. Suppose this community relations theory between the Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims, and then we have principled negotiation theory about India and Pakistan, and then human needs theory, then identity theory, because identity is what the Kashmiris most feel threatened about. And with the abrogation of Article 370, this identity question is again has become very much relevant and important. And there is again a disconnect between the Pandit Hindu minority as well and the Muslim majority. And then conflict transformation theory. And also now we have disputes regarding the power generation projects, the water kind of things, and as well as border disputes. So most of these theories I found quite relevant in case of J&K dispute. So that's what. But here in our universities and colleges, most of these theories are not a part of a curriculum, and peace and conflict studies still is not being taught in most of our colleges and universities. So that's the problem. That's why we witness a number of clashes and violence here. So that's my basically observation.
Thank you, Mustafa, for sharing that. I would like others also to likewise take a conflict around them and maybe apply one of this theory and see whether these theories are relevant to you or not. I mean, this is what we do actually when there is a face-to-face workshop. We make people, we discuss thoroughly all these conflicts and see which theory can explain which conflict, etc., etc. So, the more we use these theories, the more wiser we become. It helps us transcend our individual identity or individual limitations and be able to solve those conflicts or contribute towards solution of those conflicts around us, within the family, within the community, within the country, so on and so forth. Yes, anybody else also may?
Yeah, thank you, sir. But I don't.
Less today.
Yeah, sorry.
I want to talk less today. I want my ears.
Yeah, but it seems the participants have the other view. They don't want to talk. I don't see any questions. Request participants if there are any questions to raise hand so that I can unmute you.
I'm doing this because I got a feedback that I talk too much. I request all of you to give your feedback in the chat box for us to understand how whether this workshop is helping you, positive, negative, any feedback that you want that may help us improve the workshop. Learn from your feedback.
I think, sir, you could go ahead and give some more examples since I don't see any questions raised.
Let me ask questions then. These questions that I put, which of these theories agree with your own approach to working on conflict? Anybody can choose to answer any one of these questions. Do your goals agree with the goals given here for that theory? Think of you can imagine you can take up a conflict within your family, within your neighborhood, within the community or caste, outside or with other communities and castes, or gender, or within the country. Take any conflict that you like. Do the theories help you better understand how others are working on the same conflict? What are other approaches that do not fit in these theories? So, I'll stop sharing this so that we can see each other. Yeah. I think Professor Saral wants to speak something.
Okay. Wait a minute. Professor Saral. Yeah. She can speak, Miss Professor Saral.
Am I now audible?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am.
Yeah, there were so many theories that we will get confused. But one thing, identity is the main problem. But needs and identity are not the same. As previous Mustas Sikandar Saab said, they are two theories and they cannot be conflated like this because needs are common all through. Maybe levels of needs, some need only bread, roti, kapra or makan, some need fancy things. But identity depends on constructed identity most of the time. Another thing you said, identity based identity. Now I don't remember it, but identity needs over past losses. It is not necessary. Suppose now Hindus are talking and shouting about identity, their identity is threatened, but it is not threatened by past losses. But on the other hand, what Muslims have got past losses, maybe, but they are in their case needs, identities, history. There are several things which have got mixed up. So needs, physical, psychological, etc. are one thing. The demand for identity is another thing, and past losses means history is third thing. And they have to be harmonized or somehow brought together. Only then we would be able to understand. Is it so? Thank you. Yeah. What happened?
Yeah, actually, these identities are partly, mostly constructed. Not, I wouldn't reduce it only to construction, but these identities are constructed, and they are each identity. If you take, say, Hindutva political identity, not Hindu religion, distinguish
Yes.
Hindu religion, Kabir's Hinduism, Pawan's Hinduism, Bhakti saints, and we have fantastic uh, array of saints uh, for whom Hinduism is, the basic foundational principle of, one of the foundational principle of Hinduism is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. One truth, sages have described it differently. So we can think about wonderful things about Hindu religion, love, compassion, etc., etc. These values. But Hindutva is a political identity. This political identity was constructed exclusively on the basis of animosity with Muslims, a war with Muslims. It considered, it went back into history, and in order to construct that political unity of all Hindus, in spite of all caste differences, they went into the past and saw threat, or constructed a threat of Muslims, as if Muslim rulers and all Muslims are responsible for the acts of Muslim rulers, and Muslim rulers wanted to destroy Hindu culture, Hindu civilization, and impose Islamic culture in this country. Uh, and there was resistance. All right. So now this, we know this is not true. We know this is not true at all. We can't go a lot in details exclusively about this here, but neither the Muslim rulers try to impose Islam or Islamic identity or civilization. Neither, if even if they wanted to, they wouldn't have been able to, because they were minority, and their armies consisted of majority of Muslims, and they were Hindu and caste.
பயந்துருப்பாரு.
Just mute
Suraj, can you mute everyone?
Can you mute everybody? The Jats, Rajputs, they were all in alliance with Muslim rulers. And if they were anti-Hindu, the alliance wouldn't have lasted at all. So neither they wanted to do this, impose, nor actually the civilization was destroyed. In fact, Hindu civilization also flourished during the time. Romila Thapar points out this flourishing syndicate Hinduism, Ramcharita Manas being constructed there. But Hindutva will ignore all this. Hindutva political ideology will ignore all this and just pick up certain negative thing. One temple was destroyed, this was destroyed, this one was killed, this one had to create sati, harakiri, etc., etc. They'll pick up imagined and real both. Real instances also, but real and imagined instances and construct and threatened identity. So yes, identity, I agree with Professor Saral Jigran that identities, the solution is that let us look at many layers of identities that we have. If somebody reduces me only to being a Muslim, that person is doing injustice on me. But I'm not just a Muslim. And all Muslims do not share some 100% common way of life. They have different beliefs, they have different values, they have different approaches, and those approaches, values, way of life come from the surroundings that they share, the living space that they share with other communities. Gujarati, Marathi, India, Hindu, from professions, from many things. We absorb from all sources. So what Indian Muslim eats is completely different from what Arab Muslims eat and like to eat, so on and so forth. But you will construct a very threatened past. Jinnah said that how he created that scaremongering, that if you are going to be ruled by Hindus, Muslims are doomed, their interests are doomed, their culture is doomed, their religion is doomed. He constructed that fear. We know Hindutva are doing this even today. So they deepen the identity. I'm going on speaking because nobody else is raising their hands. I'll stop if somebody else wants to speak. Yeah, so I agree with Professor Saral Jingran. Anybody else wants to? Mushtaq, have you raised your hand again? Mushtaq bhai?
No, I think his question has been addressed. In any case, if he wishes to speak, he can.
What is hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is also a comment in the chat box
Yes.
from Seema. But
Please read out.
Yeah, I will. I'm from, this comment is from Seema Sharma. She says, I'm from West Bengal and here we experience Gorkhaland movement, which is a campaign to create a separate state of India. So I feel here we can use identity theory to explain or analyze this movement in West Bengal.
Please go ahead and speak a little bit about that.
Seema, I will unmute you.
You can speak about that Gorkhaland conflict and which theory explains this, or none of these theories explain. Yeah,
I've asked her to unmute. Of course, if she's
his hand, but Seema could speak. Go ahead and speak first, and then Bharat Bhatt. Bharat bhai, we have noted your.
I don't think Seema is. I guess she's not interested in speaking
Okay,
directly on screen.
Unmute Bharat.
Bharat, yeah, wait a minute. Bharat Bhatt, unmuted.
Yes, Bharat bhai, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute, but I was not
Yeah.
done. I think it was to be done by the host.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
You can
Okay.
speak now.
Yeah. No, we've been talking about this different types of the conflict situations, and they are based on identity and all that. But the most universal of this, which applies to almost all societies everywhere, is the conflict based on the gender construct. Means male and female.
Yes.
the-
Completely.
the-
Yes.
the gender construct is a social construct, and it's not biological.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we should talk about it also, because that is the most basic and the most universal conflict going on across the world in all societies.
Yes, we mentioned this in the past two lectures slightly.
We did, but no.
But, Neha, you want to talk more about this? We have 4 minutes. Neha?
Yeah, my network is quite patchy. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to speak.
No, you will be able to speak. We will be able to hear.
Hello?
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
No, but I haven't got the question correctly because the network is quite patchy. So if you can repeat that.
The gender construct as an identity or biological difference between male and
Yeah, like I think Sir also was saying that identities and are largely constructed, and it also holds true when we talk about gender constructs and gender identity. So I think this is something very basic, but I think we have to take this under consideration that uh, what we call sex is a biological construct, and what we understand by gender is mostly a social construct. So for example, what we expect as a society over time, due to various factors like socialization or internalization of those social norms, so all those expectations that we have from the respective sexes is actually a construct. It's a gender construct. So, for example, if women are expected to cook, it's a very, very basic example. That's not necessarily biological. You know, where Kamala Basin very famously says, you know, women are not born with wombs and so they can cook. No, it's not that. But as a society, over the years, we have relegated this role to women, which also will not hold true across societies. But this is just an example that, you know, we patriarchy and our societies, we construct certain gender roles that we assign to each sex, but these are not biological, but they're just what we as society want conveniently. And it's, of course, we understand it's a power dynamic. So over time, what we assign to the respective sexes, so men can't cry and men are not emotional. Again, you know, this whole very macho, very masculine construct that we give. This is again, this is internalized. This is how we socialize our children to be. So it's again a very social construct. It's nothing biological about it.
Right. So now the ways and means of addressing
Sorry?
this conflict situation. Ways and means of addressing this social this conflict arising out of.
I think we have to first be very conscious about it. I'm sorry, I'm taking the liberty to answer this, but I think we really first have to be conscious about it. And I personally feel that every change will start around us. So how we really are conscious about this in our own families or with our own neighborhoods or with our own communities should go a long way in addressing these conflicts.
So the just 30 seconds. Cultural mistrust theory will believe that increased communication and better communication between men and women through education system. If you sensitize men right from childhood and through education system, this gender construct based on biological difference can be addressed. That conflict can be addressed. Sharma is raising his voice. Unmute Sharma PU. Suraj?
Yeah, I have asked her to unmute.
Sharma, you have to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Please.
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
No, actually, it was just an observation that the Gorkhaland movement. It is actually a movement. It's a campaign to create a separate state in India itself. So a demand for a separate administrative unit in Darjeeling, it has been existed since 1909. So people who are demanding Gorkhaland is especially the Nepali speaking people in West Bengal. Just an observation, like as you said, anybody's identity is threatened, then the conflict arises. So here also the Nepali people, speaking people, they feel that their identity is being threatened, or they are not given a proper status. They have been said that they are from China or whatever here and there, and they're not given a proper status. So they feel that their identity has been threatened, and also I think this identity theory justifies this this movement. So people, because of this only the conflict arises. So this only one.
Thank you, Shivaji, for that explanation. And
it was just an example, sir.
Yeah, thanks for that. Likewise, others can also apply this theory to the conflicts that they see around them.